Spent the last how many years of my life seeing her with Cody and seeing their marriage. But, I want her to be happy.
Look at this picture. For years, she lingered almost like a ghost, barely noticed in the sprawling, often turbulent saga of the Brown family, a mere shadow in the luxurious halls of the Shira Chateau. Her presence subtle yet undeniably pivotal, her name being Mindy Jessup, niece to Robin Brown and devoted caretaker to the family, whose role far exceeded the mundane responsibilities typically ascribed to a nanny, for she was the ultimate insider, the silent witness to truths concealed behind the cameras, to the intimate moments and conversations that unfolded once production crews departed, privy to the raw and unfiltered interactions between the family members, to the emotional cracks and whispered confidences that the public would never witness. And now, in what insiders have dubbed the civil trial of the century, Brown versus Brown, she has stepped forward to give testimony. And her words, as we shall recount in painstaking detail, did not merely challenge the carefully curated public image of the Brown family, maintained over more than a decade, but threatened to dismantle it entirely. And what follows is a meticulous, expansive account based on insider reports and courtroom observations, detailing the profound impact of Mindy's revelations on the narrative, the perception, and potentially the legal fate of those involved. For to understand the gravity of this moment, one must recognize that this is far more than a familial disagreement or petty squabble. It is what legal commentators have referred to as the Brown family financial reckoning, a complex case in which Christine and Janelle Brown allege breach of fiduciary duty, financial malfeasance, and intentional infliction of emotional distress against Cody and Robin Brown, claiming that funds from the family's central business account, which for the purposes of this report we shall refer to as Family Traditions LLC, were systematically diverted into private accounts and ventures without the knowledge of the other wives, all while presenting a facade of financial instability, a strategy that saw Janelle fretting over her investment in Coyote Pass, Christine struggling to fund her move to Utah, both women being forced into frugality, economizing on every possible expense under the pretense that the family was facing ruin, while simultaneously, in the 5-bedroom, 2-acre residence, Robin enjoyed a far more luxurious reality, a stark contrast that the plaintiff's legal team was determined to expose in detail. And during the initial days of the trial, the pace was methodical, the presentation of financial records meticulous, accountants called to testify on unusual transactions and missing funds. And then Cody Brown took the stand, performing a display of bluster and self-pity, emphasizing his sacrifices, his heartbreak, framing himself as the aggrieved patriarch victimized by disloyal wives who did not respect his authority, claiming that all investments were in the family's future, a future that curiously appeared concentrated almost exclusively at Robin's residence, after which Robin herself took the stand, performing with what insiders described as Oscar-worthy dramatics, tears flowing before a single question had been asked, clutching tissues with trembling hands, professing a desire to maintain family harmony, insisting she had no knowledge of the financial matters, portraying herself as equally deprived as the other wives, even going so far, allegedly, as to look at the jury with quivering lips and whisper about simply wanting to live in a trailer, a statement that, when juxtaposed against her designer clothing and perfectly coiffed hair, seemed to invite skepticism rather than empathy, while the plaintiff's counsel, Anna Chararma, an incisive and no-nonsense attorney, methodically introduced evidence of Robin's lavish spending, online shopping sprees, extravagant jewelry gifted by Cody, each piece undermining the narrative of innocence and financial naivety, while the defense, led by Silas Croft, attempted to frame Robin as a well-meaning, manipulated spouse, a victim just as others were purported to be. But it was the moment when Chararma introduced Mindy Jessup to the stand that shifted the entire dynamic. A visibly tangible wave of panic washing over Cody and Robin, Cody paling, jaw tightening, Robin's tears transforming from performative sadness to sheer terror, for they knew, with an unspoken certainty, the extent of Mindy's knowledge, and as she approached the stand, modestly attired in a simple gray pantsuit, hair tied back, exhibiting nervous determination while deliberately avoiding the gaze of the accused, the courtroom fell into a hush, the anticipation almost suffocating. And as she was sworn in and questioned, the clarity and depth of her observations began to emerge, establishing her credibility, her intimate connection to the family, and her comprehensive understanding of the household dynamics, her relationship to Robin as niece and embedded insider, her employment as nanny and assistant with homeschooling and general household management, her consistent presence from late 2019 to mid-2022, often working 5 to 6 days a week for 8 to 10 hours, A witness integrated into the fabric of the household, observing the authentic behaviors of Cody and Robin when cameras were absent. And then came the revelation that would underpin the case: her compensation, approximately $80,000 per annum paid via K&R Holdings LLC, a corporate entity rather than direct payments from Cody or Robin, evidencing the stark contrast between what the other wives were led to believe and the concealed reality, with supporting documentation including bank statements, inadvertently visible paperwork, and other corroborative evidence, all systematically presented to the jury, demonstrating not only financial mismanagement but intentional concealment, undermining the defendant's claims, highlighting patterns of manipulation, deceit, and obfuscation. And as her testimony unfolded, the courtroom became a theater of exposure, each narrative layer revealing discrepancies between public appearance and private conduct, the psychological tension palpable, the subtle shifts in Cody and Robin's demeanor betraying their awareness of the truths being laid bare, and Mindy's recounting extended beyond mere financial details, encompassing emotional dynamics, moments of intimidation, the strategic cultivation of ignorance among other family members, all illustrating a complex web of ethical, moral, and legal breaches, her voice unwavering amidst cross-examination, reinforcing timelines, clarifying inconsistencies, and underscoring the deliberate misrepresentation of assets, the meticulous unraveling of the family's orchestrated appearances, the revealing of decision-making processes hidden from scrutiny, the exposure of orchestrated scarcity presented to some while privilege and abundance were enjoyed by others, a dual reality long maintained with remarkable precision. And yet, as Mindy's narrative continued, the full scope of her embedded perspective became clear, illuminating subtle behaviors, private conversations, and repeated instances of financial diversion, revealing the depth of strategic deception employed over years, the consequences not only fiscal but deeply personal, the erosion of trust, the manipulation of perception, and the emotional toll exacted upon those misled. And as the trial progressed, the cumulative effect of her testimony grew increasingly profound, demonstrating a deliberate and sustained campaign of concealment and misrepresentation, each detail meticulously corroborated, the testimony interweaving financial evidence, personal interactions, and behavioral observations into a comprehensive and compelling account, reshaping the perception of accountability, authority, and familial loyalty. The courtroom a crucible in which long-hidden truths were exposed, challenging the curated image maintained for public consumption, demanding reflection upon ethics, morality, and the dynamics of power within the family, revealing the stark divergence between what was publicly presented and what had transpired in private. A revelation that fundamentally altered both the legal and social understanding of the Brown family, highlighting the interplay between financial conduct, emotional manipulation, and psychological impact, all seen through the eyes of a witness whose proximity and insight rendered her testimony not merely credible, but transformative, reshaping narratives, redefining accountability, and compelling all present to confront uncomfortable truths. And as the evidence of K&R Holdings LLC, the diversion of funds, and the orchestrated deception was detailed, the courtroom bore witness to the systematic dismantling of a façade that had endured for years, the implications extending beyond the immediate case to questions of trust, ethical responsibility, and the influence of narrative construction, each layer of testimony exposing the intricate strategies of concealment, the prioritization of image over honesty, and the deliberate cultivation of misinformation, all presented by a single remarkably perceptive individual, whose observations rendered the hidden visible, the obscured clear, and whose courage in recounting the details forced reckoning with realities previously unexamined, illuminating the mechanisms of control, deception, and selective disclosure within the family, and Robin, the consummate manipulator, positioned herself as the dutiful guardian of the family's assets, painting her actions as responsible stewardship for the benefit of the children, as if Christine and Janelle's offspring, who were equally Cody's children and deserving of care, mattered less or were somehow peripheral to the central narrative of protection. And yet every word of Mindy Jessup's testimony revealed the cold, calculated, and meticulously strategized nature of their financial deception, a betrayal that was not incidental but deliberate, not chaotic but precise, coldly orchestrated with an intent that transcended mere greed, a plan that privileged one branch of the family while systematically diminishing the others. And while the monetary manipulation was shocking in its impersonal cruelty, what followed struck at the heart of human decency, for it was personal, malicious, and deliberately designed to destabilize and control, and it was in this context that Ms. Chararma shifted her questioning from finances to motive, exposing Robin not as a passive bystander, but as an active participant in Cody's abandonment of his other families, as a co-conspirator in a campaign of calculated marginalization and control. And the courtroom hung on Mindy's every word as she recounted the daily interactions within the Brown household, overheard conversations that were anything but casual, which were instead strategic sessions focused on limiting the access and influence of the other wives, conversations imbued with authority, manipulation, and the conscious reinforcement of hierarchy. And one particularly vivid episode in autumn 2020 illustrated the depth of this manipulation when Christine, attempting to bring Cody to Isabel before her surgery, was rebuffed and ignored, while Mindy, tidying the adjacent kitchen and unaware of being overheard, listened as Cody paced and ranted about authority, declaring, "She's not the head of this family. I am," and Robin, with intimate complicity, advised him that Christine was manipulating him through Isabel's suffering, instructing him not to yield, to demonstrate that his time was precious and must be earned, and that access to him should be conditional, a moment in which Robin positioned herself as the singular confidant, capable of understanding the immense weight of what Cody described as the burden of his crown, a phrase that epitomized narcissistic entitlement, on a scale that seemed to occupy a galaxy entirely its own. Robin actively stroking his ego, reinforcing his perception of persecution, elevating herself as the sole loyal subject within his kingdom, coaching, excusing, and rationalizing his cruelty, validating his worst instincts, and these interactions were far from isolated, for repeated conversations regarding Janelle occurred, especially when she questioned family finances or Cody's plans for Coyote Pass, moments when Cody returned visibly enraged from meetings, dismissing her concerns as irrelevant, stating she was merely an employee rather than a partner in the family enterprise, while Robin, subtler in tone, wielded concern as a weapon, suggesting financial oversight to curb Janelle's independence, all presented under the guise of familial cohesion and patriarchal order, culminating in stricter control, fewer visits, and rationalizations of disobedience. Yet the defense, led by the polished Mr. Croft, sought to discredit Mindy as biased, resentful, and unreliable, implying her recollections were rehearsed, tainted by friendship with Christine, or selectively recalled. And yet Mindy, steadfast, testified that she had witnessed years of marginalization, watching Janelle and Christine's children being ignored while Cody and Robin created an insulated, self-serving bubble funded by the labor and resources of others, a pattern of deliberate prioritization and exclusion, strategic conversations designed to manipulate access and affection, and the court observed with growing astonishment the orchestration of behavior that was not marital venting, but premeditated control, a plan executed with precision to enforce hierarchy and obedience. And the testimony revealed that Robin did not merely enable but actively coached Cody in the art of domination, excusing cruelty, rationalizing neglect, and positioning herself as the only person capable of understanding and validating his sense of burden, while systematically undermining the other wives' autonomy and well-being, a consistent pattern that extended to controlling finances, visits, and emotional access, creating a dynamic in which Cody's whims and Robin's strategic guidance dictated the entire household. And yet Mr. Croft pressed, attempting to frame Mindy as a disgruntled former employee, suggesting bias, jealousy, or a personal axe to grind, implying her stories were exaggerated or rehearsed. Yet Mindy's insistence on truth and ethical responsibility, her refusal to remain silent in the face of injustice, exposed the sustained systematic marginalization, manipulation, and abuse, demonstrating that Robin and Cody's combined actions were deliberate, methodical, and devastatingly effective, leaving the other wives and their children perpetually disenfranchised, emotionally neglected, and financially constrained, with Robin elevated from mere spouse to co-orchestrator of control, actively shaping Cody's behavior, validating manipulation, and reinforcing a hierarchy that privileged her interests and those of her immediate family at the expense of all others. The courtroom transcript capturing every detail, the pacing, tone, phrasing, and manipulative content of these conversations, painting an intricate and damning portrait of domestic governance driven by narcissism, calculated ego-stroking, and systemic marginalization, every element confirming Robin's active role in a campaign of dominance. And even as the defense attempted to recast these observations as misremembered or biased, the consistency and specificity of Mindy's testimony highlighted the structural cruelty and orchestrated neglect within the household, revealing a pattern of oppression conducted under the pretense of familial duty and concern, a persistent exertion of control that shaped access to resources, dictated emotional involvement, and enforced obedience, a sophisticated form of psychological manipulation executed across years and spaces, observed by a witness whose proximity allowed for unparalleled insight. And what emerged was more than financial malfeasance. It was an intimate map of control, a blueprint of hierarchy and subjugation, illustrating a family system where the perpetrators, Robin and Cody, combined strategic planning, psychological manipulation, and self-interest to create an environment of sustained disadvantage and exclusion for anyone outside their immediate orbit, all while framing their conduct as responsible and protective, a dual narrative of care and cruelty that underscored the depth of moral abdication, the pervasiveness of narcissistic entitlement, and the devastating personal and emotional consequences for those subjected to this orchestrated system, revealing a household where love and concern were weaponized, autonomy and independence were punished, and the voices of dissent were systematically silenced. A reality in which Robin's role was not peripheral but central, where her guidance, approval, and strategic direction were indispensable to Cody's execution of neglect, cruelty, and control, and where the cumulative impact of these interactions, financial, emotional, and strategic, created a lived experience of oppression, injustice, and marginalization that was observed, recorded, and recounted with meticulous detail, producing a narrative that was as psychologically insightful as it was ethically indicting, exposing the intersections of power, manipulation, and privilege within a domestic framework, and culminating in a testimony that not only documented wrongdoing, but illuminated the architecture of family control, revealing Robin not as the peacemaker she portrayed, but as an architect of hierarchy, an enabler of neglect, and a central figure in a sustained campaign to prioritize herself and her immediate interests above the well-being, agency, and dignity of others. And this unbroken, comprehensive account captured in the courtroom transcript, intertwined with human observation, ethical reflection, and the relentless pursuit of truth, left no doubt that the Brown household operated under a system of deliberate, sustained, and personally devastating manipulation, orchestrated by a duo who, in tandem, combined authority, narcissistic entitlement, and calculated strategy to enforce compliance, prioritize self-interest, and create an environment in which emotional and financial access was not a matter of familial equity, but of strategic obedience. And Mindy Jessup's testimony, rendered in vivid detail, serves as both witness and indictment, revealing a domestic landscape where the mechanisms of control, the manipulation of affection, the weaponization of concern, and the strategic enforcement of hierarchy were all not incidental but deliberate, consistently executed, and devastatingly effective. A single narrative of power, control, and psychological dominance that spans years, rooms, and conversations, all converging to present an unassailable picture of Robin as the active co-conspirator, central to the orchestration of neglect and marginalization, a figure whose actions were deliberate, sustained, and deeply impactful, whose influence amplified Cody's cruelty, and whose strategic positioning ensured that the family's structure and resources were controlled, managed, and manipulated to reinforce her own authority and protect her own interests above all else. Producing a household governed by hierarchy, our insider reveals that as the courtroom slowly emptied, Christine and Janelle approached Mindy, and without a single word, the three of them embraced, tears streaming down their faces in a moment of profound validation. A shared truth finally brought into the light. Yet, as devastating as this testimony was, it marked only the beginning, for the financial and emotional scheming laid the foundation, and the following day's testimony would construct a towering edifice of hypocrisy upon it, as Ms. Chararma prepared to interrogate Mindy on the very issue that had torn the Brown family apart on national television, the infamous CO-19 protocols, and what Mindy disclosed next regarding Cody and Robin's rules, who was genuinely permitted in the house, and the deceptions fed to both the cameras and the rest of the family, revealed a level of hypocrisy so staggering that it rendered the courtroom, and indeed the world, utterly speechless, transforming her testimony from matters of money and manipulation into a revelation of life and death significance. As we would explore in part 2 of this exclusive report, compelling viewers to subscribe with notifications on, and inviting discussion in the comments about whether Mindy's account could be trusted and what might unfold next. In part 2, the atmosphere as court resumed was electric. Cody and Robin visibly exhausted, their earlier confidence evaporated, as Christine and Janelle's lawyer, Ms. Anna Chararma, prepared to tackle the most controversial topic in the history of sister wives: Cody's draconian CO-19 protocols. Widely broadcast and notorious, wherein, with Robin's full support, he had imposed rules so extreme they severed his relationship with Janelle and Christine's children, refusing visits, missing holidays, abandoning them in the guise of safety, presenting himself as a man making impossible sacrifices. Yet Mindy Jessup, having lived within the household, was poised to testify that the entire narrative was fabricated, returning to the stand with composure as Miss Chararma meticulously built the case, brick by brick, demonstrating that Cody's rules were not motivated by health, but by control. And during the examination, Mindy explained that every day she worked in Cody and Robin's home between March 2020 and late 2021, she witnessed the household's strict adherence to the CO-19 guidelines as publicly depicted. With lists on the fridge, no one allowed out except for essentials, groceries to be sanitized, mail quarantined, clothing changed upon entering the house, no visitors, no travel, and any deviation resulting in Cody refusing to visit their homes. Yet despite these restrictions, Robin's relatives visited frequently, unmasked, undistanced, engaging freely with Cody, hugging and sharing meals, illustrating the hypocrisy, as when Mindy overheard Robin rationalizing to Cody that her family could be trusted as a closed circle, revealing that the rules applied selectively and were a loyalty test rather than safety measure, constructed to isolate the original wives and children and solidify a monogamous union under the guise of a plural family, and the cross-examination failed to undermine this. With Mr. Croft attempting to question Mindy's certainty regarding visitors' precautions, yet she explained that Robin's relatives were neither isolating nor cautious, contrasting sharply with the restrictions imposed on Janelle and Christine's children, confirming the deliberate and malicious intent, as the testimony exposed the calculated emotional distress inflicted upon the other wives, demonstrating that cruelty was the objective, not a byproduct. And when the plaintiff's case concluded, the defense's attempts to justify the financial irregularities and present Robin for further testimony faltered, leaving their case in ruins. And during closing arguments, Ms. Chararma recapitulated the scale of the deceit, highlighting both the financial malfeasance through KNR Holdings and the profound emotional trauma caused by systematic isolation, manipulation, and gaslighting, culminating in a damning account of how Cody weaponized the pandemic against his own children to achieve personal preference over protection, urging the jury to grant justice rather than pity. And within 4 hours, the jury returned with a unanimous verdict, finding for Christine and Janelle on all counts of breach of fiduciary duty, financial malfeasance, unjust enrichment, and intentional infliction of emotional distress, awarding not only restitution equivalent to their investments, plus a share of earnings funneled through the LLC, but also substantial compensation for emotional damages. Recognizing the pattern of deceit, manipulation, and cruelty, particularly through the exploitation of the pandemic, and in the aftermath, Cody erupted in the courtroom. Robin was inconsolable, while Christine and Janelle displayed grace, embracing their lawyer and Mindy Jessup, who had risked everything to reveal the truth. And outside the courthouse, Janelle confirmed that the verdict marked a turning point, dismantling the carefully constructed myth of the Brown family, legally branding Cody a conman and exposing Robin as his co-conspirator, with Mindy Jessup emerging as the courageous insider who liberated the truth, providing not just financial restitution but long-denied validation. With the Shira Chateau likely to be sold, Coyote Pass divided, and the Brown family as previously known effectively ended, leaving Christine and Janelle vindicated and free, rising from the ruins of deception. And this long, intricate tale concluded with the ultimate triumph of truth and justice, a narrative that proves the enduring power of courage, exposure, and accountability in the face of systemic betrayal and manipulation, a story that resonates far beyond the courtroom, celebrating the resilience of those wronged and the inescapable consequences for those who wield power deceitfully, and leaving viewers and followers to reflect on the undeniable strength, intelligence, and perseverance of Christine, Janelle, and Mindy, and to acknowledge that the legacy of their courage has forever changed the perception of the Brown family and redefined the possibilities for justice in situations of family.